Thank you very much, Charlotte, and thank you for helping arrange this. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Brian Masse. I'm the Member of Parliament for Windsor West. The Windsor Airport is in my constituency. I have a previous, experience with the airport on City Council when it was devolved and downloaded from the federal government to the municipalities, and part of that team that decided to take on the airport. And from that point in time, got familiar with the operations in a different light than I've ever had before. Not only did I understand the issue over just passenger flights that normally just see from the surface of things, but later on learned the complexity behind running operations at the airport and its connection to the social, cultural communities and economic communities that we have, and the importance of it to grow a community. And really proud to say, despite the ups and downs that we faced, even during my time period, we faced 9/11 with regards to the challenges on the border and a loss of customers and services there, and also a series of other challenges in aviation. To today, where aside from COVID and our current challenges related to that, the airport has become very much a signature part of our community. It's also recognized not only just in terms of its economic contributions, but I would emphasize a community like Windsor Essex County, where we have so many people who have come from other parts of the world, a very important part to connect to families, and for them to safely travel and have other relatives come in and out of our community to travel. The airport has played a large part of that. And actually, I would argue that that's part of the decision making to a resident, is having that connection for that. The 401 already has enough traffic. It's already busy enough with transport trucks and other types of vehicles, and the airport provides us with a lot of opportunities. And so it was with great dismay we learned the study of NAV Canada. Windsor, with several other airports, are considered a review, especially during COVID-19. We understand the challenges of the aviation industry right now, but a solution isn't to undermine ourselves for the future. Our situation as we currently know it today will change. And with that, though, we have to keep this in mind. So when we learned of this, a number of us immediately got involved to object to this process. The mere fact, the suggestion of a loss of a service tower and the services there will drive away investment, business, jeopardize our passenger flights, and also our economic and our cultural, as I mentioned, community connections in the future. The cloud that's now over top of the airport is one that needs to be lifted. And so when we had the press conference out at the airport, and indoors it's much nicer than outdoors that day, it was really important to see the community rally. And I want to say thank you to all the community members. We have Dante and Richard who are speaking here today as well too, and there's many others that have understood the importance of this. And so what's come out clear is confusion and a little bit of concern. The government's response has been one that's been not the level that I would hope for. And I do want to thank, though, Mark Garneau, the Minister of Transport, for recently helping and showing leadership on the hazardous materials potential on the Ambassador Bridge, and acknowledge his leadership to immediately engage once we discovered that vulnerability. And noted that under the Act, they had to look at only the flight pattern movements for the evaluation and public safety, which I think will hold for this area because of the complexity. I'll let pilots and others to explain that more in detail. But at the same time, there's other interests that are there, especially under COVID-19. And the response from the government is basically, we can't do anything about this. We can't stop the process. That's the way it is. And we have to wait for, and it could take a year to 2 years for this whole process to come to full fruition, because the minister will have to respond to NAV Canada's proposal when it comes forward. So with that in mind, I've sought for another solution, and the solution is to amend the legislation. We sought immediate legislative work from the beginning of this, and we followed up with subsequent work. And what I will be doing, and I'm actually engaging right now the legal team that we have through parliamentary resources to amend sections 4.91 of the Aeronautics Act, and also amending section 14 of the CAN SCA Act, to authorize the minister to preemptively veto the study. And we'll also be providing an opportunity for the government, if they want to actually amend this, or we could come forward as we craft the legislation with a period of time frame that could be sunsetted. So what does this mean specifically in practical terms? is if the government today is seriously interested in preserving the current situation at the airport for COVID, we can quickly bring into effect laws to allow the minister to have that capability. Obviously, they have to work with NAV Canada and they have to work with Transport Canada through a regular process. But by taking these two amendments to the legislation, it will empower the minister. And as the New Democrat member for Industry, Science and Technology, I can tell you that the Democrats are supportive of this process and open to amendments. So I'll be reaching out in the days to come and the weeks to come to also invite members of other parties, including my colleagues from Windsor and Essex County, if they want to actually be part of crafting this legislation. So we've identified the clauses that need to be amended. We're in agreement that this can be done, and the legislative process has begun on that. And then during this process, I'm open to both Liberals and Conservatives to help craft that legislation. So I will conclude by saying that we have been really trying to find a solution to the current situation. I think that the flexibility that I'm offering is that either this becomes a permanent part of the act or it becomes a part that could be sunsetted after COVID-19 is things that we are open to. But what we can't have right now is a continued cloud of speculation over the airport in undermining the capabilities that we see so strength-wise to build our community from the previous years that we have had. So with that, I'll conclude, say thank you to everybody. You'll hear more specifically to that process if there's questions about it, but generally speaking, it can take a matter of weeks. And lastly, in conclusion, that we have had bills in the past that have been adopted by governments. And I would ask that in the way that we're approaching this, is that this bill could also be adopted by the government. So whether it's crafted independently by myself or co-crafted with other members of other parties, that's fine. Both paths are open for them, but at the same time too, they'll be welcome and we'll have New Democratic support to pass this in the House of Commons with crafting legislation. So with that, I'll say thank you very much and over back to you, Charlotte.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Now we'll move over to Dante Albano, the corporate pilot, airport stakeholder, and petition organizer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dante. You've probably seen me before. Yeah, so I'd just like to say thank you for everyone for joining us today, and thank you for Brian for all the work you're doing. I think the solution that he's proposing is it's a great solution. It would give us a leg up in the situation that we're in because it's not an easy one. I understand that right now the minister doesn't have the power to officially stop the study, but this would give him the power. So after that, there wouldn't really be any more excuses to go by, especially in a time like this. I know everyone's kind of in an uncertain situation, and this kind of study makes the situation even more uncertain for our city. And so I want to see the study go away. I want to see our tower stay, and so does everyone else. I've spoken with Brian, Masse, Eric Kumashek, and Chris Lewis, and they're all on board also. So I don't think there's anyone in the city that thinks that the tower should leave. We all want to see it stay, and it's good for the economy. It's good for safety. So this if we could get this legislation passed, then obviously we could officially, stop this and get everything back up and running again. So thank you, Brian, and thank you for everyone.
Okay, thanks, Dante. And now we'll move over to Richard Bradwell, who's the manager of the Windsor Flying Club.
Hi there, good morning. Yes, I mean, to echo what's already been said, I think this is a very sort of practical potential solution. I would say to Mark Garneau that this is probably an unusual thing for him, that we're not asking for anything extra. We're absolutely happy with what NAV Canada provides today, the level of safety that they provide. And what we're saying is it's right and it's fit for purpose. We don't want to see it change. And really that's, two elements that are key to all of this. The diverse mix of air traffic that comes into Windsor, commercial traffic, private jet traffic, which is growing, which is good for Windsor, which is a good news story locally. Student pilots, we've got 2 flight schools. Normally, outside COVID, normally they're very busy schools. And this is, all positives. And we're, as I say, very happy with the way NAV Canada currently manages what is quite a complex environment. And I know it can be a little bit difficult for folks who are not familiar with it to perhaps understand, as pilots, what we mean by a complex airspace. We have Detroit Metro not very far away, hanging right over the top of us. Their airspace sits right over the top of us. We have Detroit City. I'll give you a little bit of Google homework to do. Detroit City back in the mid-70s, the scene of a mid-air collision, very sort of, tragic case, 4 people killed, a very serious incident. And we have a piece of airspace today called the Riverside Descent Area, which is very actively managed by the air traffic controllers. Here in Windsor, pilots are guided in through that space to make sure that never happens again. So most of us as pilots look at we consider any dilution of what we have today to be very dangerous and very negative. So you consider the mix. We've got student pilots in there who are learning. We've got other traffic that's moving at different speeds. We've got complex airspace. This is not an environment where we should have anything less than what we have today. So the positive is we don't want anything extra. We're very happy with what we have, but we're very firm that we don't want to see it diluted for safety reasons that hopefully we're starting to help everyone understand.
All right, thank you, Richard. So that will end that portion of today's press conference. We'll now move to questions from the media. So just a reminder, you'll get 1 question and 1 follow-up. So far, I've only received 1 question in the chat. So the first question will go to Mike Hogan. Oh, Mike, are you still there? Mike Hogan? Okay, maybe we've lost Mike. Okay, so if any other members of the media have any questions for Brian or the other participants, you can just unmute yourselves one at a time. And actually, sorry, I just got a message. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mike's question is, has the Canadian Business Aviation Association been contacted or involved at all? That's his question.
Okay, thank you.
So go ahead. I know from, I'll let Dante you finish, but for this initiative, no, at this particular time, we focused on the legislative path. So most of all our work over the last number of weeks, especially following the recent briefing from Minister Garneau to the city and other officials, comes from the focus on just get the legislation. So those types of things will be reached out from our office next, because also we'll be focusing on the other areas where they're actually under review, because this legislation would affect positively our region, but also the other areas that are under potential study as well too, especially during COVID-19. As things change, the study is even more questionable during that time frame. So it would allow a vehicle, so to speak, for other MPs to be able to support their regions.
Okay, we've got a
Can I
couple
ask a
more
question?
questions. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's Dale Molnar from CBC. I'm not sure if I'm in the right order here, but I just want to ask Brian if Marc Garneau knows about this move and if he's amenable to this. Yeah,
thanks, Dale. No, we'll be sending him a letter about this and that. I've been in communication with the hazardous material most recently, and we've crafted it. And I have actually alerted at least the other MPs that we're taking this step. Did that this morning. We've been really just waiting back for research from the Library of Parliament to make sure that we had the proper clauses in place. And so now we'll do is we'll reach that out. And that's why I'm been inviting, it's in stage 1 of the development. So the way it works is that we have Library of Parliament craft the research necessary, and then it now goes to the legal drawing. And so what we did is we finally moved it into the legal drawing, so that they're looking at those specific clauses. So they've researched the clauses that need to be amended. We're working on those aspects, and then we're open to having others participate in that process. As you're aware, the government eventually took my sports betting bill to make it law. Now it's still, it hasn't been fully done in the House of Commons still yet, but they've adopted it. They could do the same thing for this legislation. So what I've done though is I front loaded the openness for them to basically take the legislation.
I'm sorry. So how long do you think it'll take before this could pass?
Well, we'll have the legislation drafted before Parliament returns or shortly thereafter. It won't be much longer than January, or it'll happen in January. That's what I've been told from the legal teams. And then from there, it's a matter of how quickly we get it, hopefully, interest. And if so, it'll really come down at this point in time. It'll come down if the government's sincere about wanting to actually, protect the towers during COVID and having a different process than is what's been put here, then they can act on it immediately. And they have our support. So it could be rather quickly. Depends if they put it in a bill that is like a budget bill, or it depends if they leave it on their own. The sports betting bill that they took from me, which is fine. This is why you push these things. They've decided a standalone legislation. So that'll take a little bit longer than if it's in a budget bill or another economic bill. So it just depends on their process, Dale, in terms of what they choose, if they choose to move it. But it really will show, at the end of the day, this will show the clear path forward. If we want to do it, then here's the tools to do it. If you don't, then that's a different story. Then we'll know where people stand, and the community will also know that this is going to be purely based upon the raw study from NAV Canada, and it will be deficient of what I think is important is some conversations around the economic, social, cultural impact of having the tower available in the services, because they certainly don't match up. Because when you look at airline insurance companies, insurance and so forth, they're going to see a totally different world than what we have. So again, this is a clear path forward if the government wants it.
Okay, so we've received some questions in the chat. Oh, sorry.
Is Eric helping you as well?
Not this time, no. We wanted to present to what we had been working, and I've reached, like I said, I've met the other MPs know that we're doing this, and so we didn't want to put them on the spot on the particular start of doing this, and just to present it as the path forward. We did the research, and it's very, it's very dry news, really, in many respects. It's a legislative approach to doing things. But we wanted to make sure that they understood the idea and everything's out there and the process has started in terms of being able to draft it. And I have my spot in there with the legal team, and Eric and Dave App, and as well as Chris Lewis. They're all welcome to help draft the legislation and push it forward. So again, I have no problem sharing the bill. They can help draft it together. They can second it, all those different things. So hopefully the government will see the light of this right away and might even draft their own legislation. That's all open paths. We found if we want to do this, we found the ways to be able to do it in a legal sense for the government. So what we've done is unplugged any potential barrier that they would have to be able to act on things right now and to end the basic I guess a holding pattern that we have for our entire tower.
Okay, so we've received some questions in the chat, so I'm going to run through them. So first is Richard Garten, and he's asked, can you repeat which sections of which acts need to be changed to accomplish this?
Yes, thank you, Richard, and we'll send that out as well too. So I'll read it specifically from the team that we got back. Amending section 4.91 of the Aeronautics Act to alter the nature of the regulations that may be made, thereby requiring Transport Canada to make modification to the CARS, or alternatively, we're going to create a couple paths for them here, amending section 14 of the CAN SCA to authorize a minister to preemptively veto a proposed reduction or termination of services. This would also likely require responding amendments to section 4.91 of the Aeronautics Act as well. So, basically, really, Rich, as it meant that the best way, I think, there's a couple paths forward, and the legal teams are looking to provide options. And again, we could also add a sunset clause if we wanted to, if there's a discomfort of having this to be permanent. So again, we're trying to be flexible here, but it's section 14, and that would provide the veto and again, corresponding is section 4.91 of the Aeronautics Act. And so we'll make sure we provide that specific detail to people if they like as well.
Okay, and Rich, do you have a follow-up question?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next question. It's from Christy Lee, and the question is for Brian. She wants to know, is there a timeline on the legislative change?
There won't be a particular timeline aside. Well, there is. Okay, yes, there is. Right now, it's in kind of the first phase of the crafting element to make it, basically the law. So the legal teams now have been assigned to look at the intent that we want to do, and they'll start to draft what's particularly important for it to reflect the change in the laws and subsequent ones that must be made. So that's going to happen over the next number of weeks. And from that, it will then just be a process where it has to be double checked and then eventually tabled in the House of Commons. So you're probably looking at the bill being operational by the beginning of February. That's what we're hoping, mid-February at the latest. And then from there, it will be a tool for Parliament to be adopted at any point in time. The government can also decide to move on its own if they want as well. So those are kind of the general timeframes. And from then, once the legislation is actually completed, and that's why I wanted to come forward now to invite those that may want to participate in the crafting of it. It's just a matter of political will. So that's why of today's news conference is to, and the way that we've approached it is to encourage, if you do really want to save the tower, here's the way to do it. And we're open to basically partnering with anyone.
Okay, and we've got one last question. This one's from Dawson Chen. And he said there have been some conflicting messages around what has initiated the NAV Canada review of Windsor's airport, including that it potentially emanates from a Transport Canada direction to reduce costs. Does Brian have any clarification on that? How open does Brian expect Minister Garneau to be to his idea?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, and that's it actually gets to, I think, like, where did this come from? And I think it is an internal fight between Transport Canada and NAV Canada over something, because it doesn't make any logical sense what we're doing right now. There's been nothing but concern and support for trying to ensure that many industries remain particularly solvent during COVID-19, and having NAV Canada, which then actually has a connection piece to so many other companies that are basically struggling to get by right now, and to unplug that as the linchpin for not only just the aviation industries that's flying in and out of the airport, but also the service industry around it, makes absolutely no sense right now. This is, it's unbelievable we're at this point in time. It makes complete absurdity to just say that this is on its own and we just have to look at a few jobs and that's it. I mean, the government is, and taxpayers, actually it's taxpayers right now are funding many companies and corporations and individuals to get by during COVID-19 that are going to be dependent upon the airport tower. And I'm sure other communities feel the same thing. And why we would undermine everything and all that investment, people need to be held to account. And so where this comes from is beyond me. It's a distraction that's very frustrating. As a legislator, I want to work on other things, but this is so important for my community, my constituency, our country. When you look at the fact of our shared airspace with Michigan and the United States. So I hear rumors, I hear different messages. I'm hoping the way that I'm approaching this right now, in terms of I wanted to go, I mean, this has been a very much a public battle. There's been a lot of back and forth on it. I'm trying to do a reset here to see whether or not if words then that people say live up to actions that they'll take. That's the intent of today, and also the legislation, putting it out there. And I'll be approaching all of my colleagues, and again, they're quite. I'm quite willing to have them as part of the crafting part of the bill. So this way, I'm not crafting the bill and then putting it in front of their face. What we're doing now, though, is we're telling the public and our partners that we've been working on this, is that I'm working on a legislative solution, and I'm open to having other people participate in that at the front door right away, and not be forced or feel compelled afterwards. So I'm hoping that approach to Minister Garneau and his party is one that will be seen as a positive sign that New Democrats are here to try to find solutions, and we found one, and we're willing to share on how to build that process together, because this is really important for so many people.
Dawson, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. So Brian, you mentioned if we want to do this, then this is a way to do this. But what if we, and more specifically our federal ministry partners, do not want to do this? What's the outcome then?
Well, yeah, so there's two outcomes. One is the political consequence, I think, of some saying that they actually want to do this, and this was the problem why we can't stop it from happening now, because that's been unplugged, and the truth will be unveiled completely. And then if that isn't a willing aspect, then we're going to have to fight to continue to look at the parameters of legislation, to look at the safety component, and present all the evidence to fight for those changes. But it also brings, I think, a wider context of the privatization of NIAF Canada to begin with, and the prioritizations of society. Going beyond this is to basically kill and destroy a lot of our economy, jobs, and cultural connections over a few dollars related to the linchpin to making all this stuff happen. It doesn't make any sense in a contextual sense of how to actually run a community and run an industry. It fails upon itself. So I'm hoping, though, that will bring in light a change, that the privatization of the model that was presented was absent of some considerations, and this is one of those considerations that I think is of value. And I think that we won't be alone in this. I think there'll be other communities as well that recognize that the airport and NAV Canada services are more than just what's on the surface, and there's many more things to be involved. I think there's a public safety element here that's very solid. We've seen presented evidence that I think is very valid, and I feel very good about that. But also, too, having all the other things dismissed outright is just not making any sense whatsoever.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Delson. So we have one final question from Mike Hogan. He's asked, has the trickle-down effect of the growth in corporate aviation been considered?
Yeah, well, that's part of the arguments that are made better than myself. I think of Rakesh from the Chamber of Commerce and others, the mayor, that have made these arguments. And I've seen these connections myself. I mean, when we had 9/11 and we lost a lot of business, there was a lot of different ideas and different work that was done. And I got to give the current airport, going from Mayor Francis to Mayor Dilkins, a lot of credit for recognizing in the way that the airport operations have turned around, the hard work that's been done there to make it so important as part of our future. The work on cargo. I know that the Port Authority under Steve Salmons mentioned some of the connection pieces that they're looking forward in the future, and others would do much more justice for those arguments. But it's quite clear is that this idea that the jobs at the tower and the tower itself is an island into itself that should be evaluated doesn't make any sense from an economic development perspective.
Brad, can I add something to that too? Yeah, so when it comes to like corporate aviation in an airport, one thing that someone had once mentioned to me is when investors are coming to a city to see if they want to make an investment in whether it's business or real estate or something, if they're flying in, the first thing they see is the airport, and without a tower, the airport starts to decline. And so if a big investor is coming in and they fly in and the first thing they see is an airport that's starting to run down, the first impressions are everything. So I think with our tower here and everything, our airport is in recent years been awesome. And if we start seeing a decline, then it's going to start looking bad on the city, and I don't think anyone wants that. So.
Yeah, I also have a letter here that was sent from Greenshield as an example. We sent to Mayor Dilkins, Member of Parliament Chris Merschik, and Milady Joy, Minister Joy, and it's basically it identifies their concern and their employees who use the airport on a daily basis, and it affects them here because they're have corporate operations not only here but also in Toronto. So that's just one example of the effect, and they're starting to speak out.
Okay, if any members of the media have any last questions,
so can I
mute yourself and ask? Oh.
Yeah, can I just quickly just have you connect the dots, Brian? Just that why this legislative change would be necessary, why the transport minister just can't intervene.
Yeah, the transport minister has argued, and we did, and to be fair to the transport minister, some of the Library of Parliament research we got back is that there are some barriers for him to look at the matter beyond that of public safety, and also to basically stop the study from happening. And so instead of spending my time delving even to another layer about that, we've taken that for face value for what it is, and had Parliament research say, okay, well, how can we actually get the minister to be able to stop the study? And that's the amendments that have been come back from the Library of Parliament. So it takes that element aside, and I think that there is you know, some sincere reservations that the minister has with regards to it, and the suggestion that, you know, he feels, you know, handcuffed, I guess, I suppose, under this, and that's fair. You know, they have an interpretation of what the legislation he currently is empowered under, and so this is to eliminate that barrier and to provide another framework. So this framework that we're proposing includes more than just his current powers. It gives him a veto process for specific issues on it, and this especially during COVID. And again, Dale, I'm opening it up to being a, you know, they can help craft it so we can find out, do they like a permanent one? Do they want a law to give them extra powers, a time frames that could be sunsetted, so post COVID it returns to the same way? I'm open to all those things. I have my personal opinions and you know, on those different processes, but the bottom line is we're open to whatever one that is interested, just to make this stop, especially under COVID-19 in the immediate future. We just don't want it lingering around anymore. And so the minister has a problem with the current law. I want to change the law, and he's got my support to do so.
Okay, we'll take final questions from any members of the media. So you can just go ahead and mute yourselves one at a time, or you can send me your question in the chat. Okay, I think we've had all the questions. So now we're inviting other participants, if they have any questions for Brian, Dante, or Richard, you can unmute yourselves and ask them your question.
I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Brian, can you talk a little bit about how this acting right now will actually not just be addressing the current situation with COVID, but if the minister wants to, can actually use this to bolster COVID recovery so that Windsor's hitting the ground running and poised and not having to have this kind of review, like you said, as a cloud over the airport. Isn't that the ultimate goal, that under recovery that we can be as responsive as the airport is right now?
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely, this definitely can be part of a recovery bill as well too. There's no doubt that's hence why we've suggested whether the law wants to be sunsetted or whether it wants to remain permanent, and being open to both those processes. So, and that's kind of the frustrating aspect of this is during COVID-19, we know, even other industries that have been out there, they recognize that there's a pent-up demand. So there's clearly you know, a lot of controversy right now going on with regards to the travel industry and different issues around that. But what is known in that factor is that people do want to travel and will want to go places once we actually have vaccinations and we move forward and there's safety and all those things. There's a pent-up demand. And so what we don't want to have to do is to somehow get back on the treadmill and start over on basic things. And also too is that our region and smaller regions like ourselves that are under this cloud also get the services continued back for our areas. So I think you know, maybe Dante or Richard might have a better view on that too, but it just to me it would be you know, having to make up lost ground just because of a technical problem in a bill that was crafted 20 years ago through a privatization under a different society and system that we had before for such a minutia and undermining our other dollars just doesn't make any sense. We got to be more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes us into an interesting area because you know, the study currently continues, obviously, and as a business, as a flight school, we're engaging in that process. But I could very easily argue that's taking, you know, my eye off the ball. I want to be engaging with, you know, my existing customers, looking at how I'm going to get future customers and how I'm going to drive this business forward. I'm deflected from doing that because I have to engage in this study. I have to take it seriously. We've spent many hours preparing all of the documentation, all of the evidence that we wish to put forward, and we are engaging. But could I be spending my time on better things, preparing for when COVID is over? I would argue absolutely. And that's all part, we're one example of many businesses associated with the airport and in Windsor in general, who are in that position. So I think it does very importantly touch on that in terms of what are we spending our time and our energy on versus what we could be doing. Frankly, this is not particularly welcome. We'll do a good job of it and we'll engage, but we could do without that. We've got much bigger things to worry about.
Okay, does anyone else have a question?
Brian, Neil Arnold here. Did you mention
I think we lost him. I can't
We
hear
lost you, Neil. Yeah, you're on mute, Neil.
He's still on mute, Neil. Is Charlotte, if you're the host, are you able to unmute him?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
There we go.
Okay, Neil, you should be unmuted.
Okay, you got me now?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. You mentioned, Brian, that there were some other communities that were also threatened by studies. I guess, is your effort involving those, or what other communities are you aware of that they're studying the closure of towers? And is their primary function or primary study based on cycles at the airport? Is that the rationale?
Yeah, I'll leave it to the pilots to more about that, but the NavCan study, I understand it is that there is supposed to be more is what I worry about. It's on a volume level, is from what I understand that, and we're a little bit lower than the volume level I'd like to see, even though we've been increasing significantly. And I can stand to be corrected if my colleagues here have anything more to that, but that's what I understand a lot of it's focused on. And then for there's like Whitehorse and Regina. There's a few other places that are also listed, and we'll be reaching out to all those other MPs for those areas as well too, because this bill affects all of that. But given what we've been doing down here, wanted to start with this and to share as our first step, and then part of that too is seeing if the other MPs from those other areas, which we will be doing, want to participate in this as well too. So again, that's why we didn't just craft the legislation to have in front of you to put it down today and like wait another month to do this. We wanted to show, because there's a lot of interest in this issue, is that we are still working hard on it. We hear what you are saying out there, and thankful that you're doing the petition and other things and you're still talking about this, and that we're here to help and make sure that there's going to be a kind of a path that you're with through the entire process. So we're at the front door of crafting legislation, as opposed to normally sometimes what happens is a member just crafts that legislation, then he or she goes to other MPs. We're kind of doing it a little bit differently this time. We're inviting others to come in. We know what has to be fixed. There's a couple of ways it can be fixed. There's a couple of choices to make along the way, and we're inviting that to be an open house. And so then the other MPs from those other areas, like Whitehorse, for example, will be invited to be part of that in the next week, really. Because now we have something more substantial to go to them with. It's not just an idea anymore. We know what has to be fixed. How you fix it is going to be part of the legal teams that do that and our legislative staff.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we have time for another question. If anyone has a question, just unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so that will conclude today's press conference. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to Dante and Richard as well for taking part. The recording of this press conference we will post, I think we said, on Brian's Facebook page. So just keep an eye out for that later today.
Thanks
Awesome.
everyone
Thank you.
for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for all
Yeah.
your work you're doing.
No problem. Thanks
Yeah.
for everyone for your, asking questions and everything. It shows that there is interest in this, so appreciate that.
No, we appreciate the advice. We're always looking for more.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.